So hey guys. How are you? The series name is What If Naruto Was in Family Guys? So let's start the series. The Griffin family's quiet was, as always, short-lived and fragile. Stewie Griffin adjusted his goggles with a chubby, careful hand in his room, which was part nursery and part mad scientist lab and broke the laws of physics. He whispered to the humming, sparking device on his workbench. Almost there, my pretty. It was a mix of chrome, vacuum tubes, and parts he had stolen from the Quahog power grid. The main part was a glowing, unstable-looking crystal he had acquired from the mineral exhibit at the local museum. He named it the ontological oscillator. What is the goal? A universal remote, not for TVs, but for the basic settings of reality itself. You can control the volume of gravity, surf through dimensions, and maybe finally turn off that annoying baby gurgle that everyone thought he would make. The quiet downstairs broke. Hey Lois! Peter Griffin's voice echoed through the floorboards, and then there was the unmistakable thump-thump-thump of him climbing the stairs. I'm going to help Stewie with his science. You know, I used to be a scientist. I came up with the idea of putting bread in the toaster but not pushing it down. Then you. He came into the room without knocking. Stewie didn't move a muscle. His focus was like a laser. Brian, if you're here to criticize my method based on a half-remembered passage from Kerouac, I'm going to cut off your balls with a rusty spork. Hey, it's me, your dad, Peter said, with his chest puffed out. He had a beer in one hand and a sandwich with mayonnaise and bananas in the other. I brought food for the brain. And beer. For my mind. Stewie sighed, which sounded like a long-suffering sound. Father, your presence is as welcome as a case of shingles at a nudist camp. I am at a very important point. The tachyon emitter and the quantum flux capacitor are lining up. If one vibration goes wrong, we could see a localized reality inversion or, even worse, a complete breakdown of causality. Is that the thing that blinks? Peter interrupted, pointing a finger covered in mayonnaise at the main crystal. Don't touch the thing that blinks. But Peter's curiosity, which was slow and heavy, had been piqued. He walked slowly closer, and the floorboards creaked under his weight. It looks like the jelly they put in donuts. The kind that gets on your shirt and makes Lois mad. He took a thoughtful sip of his beer. Hey, what if we could make a world where that jelly never gets dirty? That would be something. Stewie said. The ambition is staggering. And then he made one last small change with a screwdriver. Now, if you could please move your heavy mass away from me, I need to start the main sequence. Peter, on the other hand, was staring at the console with a confused look on his face. Why does it have so many buttons? There are only 12 buttons on the TV remote. This one must have 100. There are too many options. That's communist, he said, pointing to his beer bottle for emphasis. The curve of the bottle was a sad and funny play in slow motion. A drop of beer, shining in the light of the moving crystal, fell off the lip. Stewie's eyes got big with fear. No! The droplet hit a group of exposed wires with a tiny hiss. Nothing happened for a second. Peter let out a burp. Look! It's okay. Stewie, you worry too much. It might be thirsty. Machines need water. I saw that in a magazine at the doctor's office once. Then, the ontological oscillator made a sound that was more of a feeling than a noise. It was a deep, low-frequency thrum that shook their teeth and bones. The crystal went from a soft glow to a bright actinic white. Lines of colors that were impossible to look at, smelled like burnt toast, and sounded like radio static came out of the device and crawled up the walls, changing the space around them. Peter raised his beer as if to toast and said, Ooh, pretty lights. You idiot! Stewie screamed as he scrambled for the master cutoff switch. You've set off an uncontrolled dimensional cascade. The room got bigger. The posters on the walls of World Conquest turned into screaming, abstract shapes that stretched out. The floor below them stopped being solid and turned into a swirling whirlpool of plaid and paisley. They heard Lois's distant, scared scream of Peter? From downstairs. And Brian's worried bark. The device didn't go off. Instead, it blew up the world around it. It was like God tearing a seam in the universe, and it was very loud. Above the Griffin house, a jagged tear in space-time opened up. It didn't suck things in, it just erased the line between here and there. And then the whole Griffin house, including the foundation, lawn gnomes, and everything else, was pulled through the hole, making it feel like it was being turned inside out and dusted for crumbs. There was a lot of controlled chaos at the third training ground of Konohagakure. The Chunin exam preliminaries were in full swing, and the air was thick with effort, ozone from lightning jutsu, and the smell of blood. Uzumaki Baruto was in one of the designated rings, his brow furrowed in concentration, and he was having a tense taijutsu fight with someone from Suna. Uzumaki Naruto, the 7th Hokage, and his father, watched from the observation platform with a proud but tired smile on his face. Nara Shikamaru, his right-hand man, sighed like a genius who was always surrounded by annoying people. Shikamaru said, "This is so boring. Couldn't we have just used the old brackets for the tournament?" "What's the fun in that, Shikamaru?" Naruto smiled, and his blue eyes crinkled. "This tests how well they can adapt. Their spirit." Shikamaru said, "It tests my ability to stay awake through 23-minute fights in a row." Out of nowhere, Hatake Kakashi, the 6th Hokage, appeared next to them in a swirl of leaves. His one visible eye looked serious. "Naruto, we have a problem." The sky above the training ground moved before Naruto could say anything. There were no clouds. It was like someone punched the sky's canvas from behind. The air pressure dropped so quickly that it made everyone's ears pop. Birds in the trees around us stopped chirping in the middle of their song. Every ninja in the arena, from new genin to experienced jounin, froze. Their combat-trained instincts screamed that there was a threat they couldn't see. Then, with a soundless, shattering tear, a wound of swirling non-colors opened in the air. It was empty, but full of static and changing shapes that couldn't be real. Shikamaru breathed. "What in the name of the sage?" And all signs of sleepiness were gone. "Now, barrier team!" Naruto yelled, and his Hokage cloak flared as he ran to the edge of the platform, his hands already moving through seals. But it was too late for walls. A huge, ugly thing fell from the tear and hit the ground. It had sharp edges and was made of materials I had never seen before, like vinyl siding, asphalt shingles, and a big glass window with a flower box. It was a piece of a building. And then, in a hailstorm of debris, the whole, intact, 2-story Griffin family home came next. It didn't crash down with a fiery explosion. Instead, it landed with a huge, ground-shaking crunch of splintering wood, shearing metal, and broken concrete, right in the middle of 3 training rings. The impact sent a wave of dust and debris flying outward, knocking ninjas off their feet. The house skidded to a stop, leaning at a 15-degree angle, with its foundation buried in the hole it had made. There was still one stubborn lawn gnome with a fishing pole standing on the front porch. There was complete, dead silence on the training ground. The dust slowly settled. Hundreds of shinobi from all the major villages stared in disbelief at the strange, pastel-colored house that had taken over their sacred training grounds. Naruto landed softly in the cloud of dust, and his chakra flared up to protect the nearest dazed genin. Sasuke Uchiha appeared next to him in a flash, his Rinnegan spinning as he took in the strange sight. Sakura Haruna was already making her way to the wreckage, her hands glowing with medical chakra, ready for the wounded. "Report," Sasuke said in a flat, dangerous voice. "Dimensional breach? Technology from Otsutsuki?" Naruto said. "I don't feel any familiar chakra," as he opened his senses. "It's empty. But wrong." The door to the strange house creaked open. Peter Griffin fell out, covered in plaster dust, but his beer bottle was still in his hand. He squinted against the sun and looked at the crater, the ruined land, and the hundreds of armed men and women in strange uniforms who were staring at him. He blinked. Then a big, dumb smile spread across his face. "Whoa," he said, and his voice echoed in the quiet. "Best. LARP. Always. Did you all make this set?" He kicked a piece of training ground 3 dirt and said, "The dirt feels so real. Nice touch with the, ninja guys. Very real. Where is the booth? I want to get a t-shirt. And a drink. Mostly a beer." Stewie came out from behind him, holding his burned and smoking universal remote. He looked at the Konoha shinobi, their headbands, and the Hokage monument carved into the mountain face in the distance, and his face turned pale beneath the soot. "Oh, balls," he whispered, his voice so small that it sounded scared. "Father, we're not in Quahog anymore." Lois followed, holding a scared Meg and a confused Chris. "Peter, what did you do?" she cried. Brian crawled out last, coughing and his fur standing on end. The ninja world looked. The Griffin family looked back. The Sharingan in Uchiha Sasuke's eyes came to life and took in every strange detail. He stepped forward, and his presence was cold and threatening. "Identify yourselves," he said, his voice cutting through the air like a knife. "What is the point of this intrusion?" Peter puffed out his chest, not realizing that Sasuke's stance was deadly. "Griffin is my name. Peter Griffin. This is my family, too. We were doing some science at home when the delivery men must have taken a wrong turn. Is this the Renaissance Fair at Quahog Community College?" the flyer said. "Feudal Japan theme." Naruto stepped up next to Sasuke and held up a hand to calm him down, but his own face was tense. He said, "You're in the Hidden Leaf Village," in a tone that was firm but not mean. "You crashed in the middle of our Chunin exams. You have to come with us to be questioned. Now." Peter's smile finally faded. "Hidden Leaf. Chunin? Lois, did we get back on one of those buses that solve murders? You shouldn't have bought the Groupon. A young Chunin from Kumo, who was nervous about proving himself to the Hokage and still shaken up from the crash, saw Brian, a talking dog in a collar and sweater, growling protectively in front of Meg. He thought it was a threat. Beast technique, the Chunin yelled, hands flying through seals. Fire style, fireball jutsu. A respectable, head-sized ball of fire roared out of his mouth and flew straight at the Griffin family. Brian, be careful! Meg screamed. It felt like time was going slower. The fireball, a sign of the shinobi world's power and discipline and the highest level of elemental chakra manipulation, crossed the halfway point between the ninja and the house. And then, all of a sudden, it changed. With a puff of pink smoke and the sound of a tiny party horn, the huge fireball turned into a spinning, sparkling vortex of rainbow-colored confetti. The paper shreds fell harmlessly on Brian's fur and settled in his eyebrows. The Kumo Chunin stared at his hands, horrified. I don't get it. Naruto and Sasuke, on the other hand, weren't paying attention to the confetti. Their eyes were glued to a patch of grass at the bottom of the crater, which was right where the energy from the dimensional tear had washed over the ground. A single, normal dandelion was twisting and growing, and its yellow flower turned into a tiny, perfect face. It blinked cartoonish eyes, looked around at the shocked, silent faces, cleared its throat with a small ahem, and then began to sing in a clear tenor voice. I'm a little daisy, short and stout. Here is my stem, and here is my sprout. The daisy's roots did a little tap dance. The song stopped suddenly when Sakura threw a kunai at the singing flower, pinning it to the ground. It drooped with a small, sad sigh. The silence that came after was thicker, heavier, and much scarier than the one that came after the crash. It was the quiet that came from breaking a basic rule of the universe in front of them. Naruto turned away from the wilting daisy and looked at the American family, who were covered in dust and looked confused. Peter thought the confetti was candy and was trying to eat it. The seventh Hokage's face changed to one of serious, deep worry. He looked at Shikamaru, whose tactical mind was already racing, and then at Sasuke, whose Rinnegan saw the edges of reality falling apart and sticking to the strange house-like cobwebs. Secure the area, Naruto said in a low, commanding voice that reached all the ninjas present. Don't touch anything. Nobody uses jutsu near that house or these people, he said, then turned his attention to the griffins. He was no longer careful. Instead, he was strong like a leader facing an unprecedented crisis. You all have to come with me to the Hokage Tower. Right away. He looked at the confetti on the ground and then at the daisy that was pinned with a kunai. He said to no one in particular, something is very wrong here. And high above, the jagged tear in the sky pulsed once, like a sick heart, before slowly, unwillingly, starting to sew itself back together. But it was too late to fix it. The seed of disorder had been sown. The hole in the world was filled in, but the crack in reality had already started to grow. The trip from the third training ground to the Hokage Tower was a strange, quiet parade. The streets of Konoha, which were usually full of the happy noise of a peaceful village, were now quiet and tense. As the group walked by, Umbu agents appeared on rooftops, their animal masks making it impossible to see them. They formed an invisible, deadly barrier. The strange intrusion had spread like wildfire through the shinobi network, and the civilian population had been gently but firmly told to stay inside by a sudden, unexplained, infrastructure inspection order. The Griffin family walked in the middle of the procession, and Peter fell down. Naruto and Sasuke were in front, their backs straight and ready. Sakura and Shikamaru stood on either side of the Griffins, watching closely. At the back was a whole squadron of Jounin. Peter, feeling a little braver, waved at an Umbu in a mask who was sitting on a gutter. Hey, cool mask! You celebrate Halloween all year? That's dedication. One year, I was a sexy pizza. Lois said it was rude to people who love pizza. Peter, for God's sake, be quiet, Lois said, her arm around Meg's shoulders. Her eyes were wide as she took in the impossible buildings with their tall, green roofs, the distant faces carved into the mountainside, and the people moving with a fluid, athletic grace that showed they had been training for years. This was not a fair from the Renaissance. The air itself felt different, like it had a purpose. Stewie muttered. Fascinating. As his short legs tried to keep up. He was looking at the village with the same interest as a scientist, and his earlier fear had turned into a burning curiosity. Pre-industrial aesthetics mixed with what looks like a very advanced, martial-focused social structure. There are no visible power lines, but there are high levels of ambient energy. Brian, write this down. Brian, who was walking with his tail low, laughed. Note? Stewie, we just fell through a hole in reality into what looks like a ninja dictatorship in the Middle Ages. I'm not taking notes, I'm writing my last will and testament. I leave my collection of slightly used chew toys to the most stuck-up dog I've never met. Chris whispered. They're ninjas. His voice was a mix of fear and awe. He pushed Meg. Like real ninjas. Do you think they know the one where you vanish in a cloud of smoke? That's the one I like best. Meg hugged herself and felt smaller and less visible than ever. The stares from the few villagers who could be seen weren't the usual ones that people in Quahog gave. They were looks of deep-seated fear and suspicion. She was one of the threats. They got to the Hokage Tower, a huge building that stood in the middle of the village. Inside, there was a sense of controlled panic. As the strange procession came in, the clerks and advisors hurried around and their whispers died down. They were led not to an office, but to a large, circular council chamber deep inside the building's secure core. There was a big window that looked out over the village, and the walls were lined with sound-dampening seals. Wait here, Naruto said, and his tone made it clear that there was no room for argument. He, Sasuke, Shikamaru, and Sakura all went into a room next door. The door closed with a soft click of the locks and a faint glow of chakra. The Griffins were alone in the echoing room. Peter went right to the window. Whoa. Good view. It does need a billboard, though. Or one of those big inflatable tube men. Really catches the eye. Will you be quiet? Brian snapped, finally losing it. Don't you get what's going on? These people are in the military. They have guns. They can throw lightning and spit fire. We live in a world where the Geneva Convention is probably just a joke. Chris said to no one. The dog talks. Still stuck on that simple fact. Lois sat down in one of the soft chairs and put her head in her hands. What happened? A house, in the sky. What should we say to the insurance company? Stewie jumped on a chair that was too big for him and said, The insurance implications are the least of our worries, Mother. We have caused an ontological event to happen across dimensions. The fact that we, and more importantly our house, are here and not being destroyed right away suggests that the physical laws in our universes are similar. But the confetti transformation incident shows that those laws have broken down badly in our immediate area. Brian growled. Speak English, you little demon. Stewie said bluntly. Our stupid is leaking. And it's ruining their world. The mood in the nearby strategy room was bad. There was a holographic map of the village floating above the main table, thanks to a Fuinjutsu array. There was a pulsing, faintly iridescent area around the third training ground. Report, Naruto said with his arms crossed. The nice father was gone, and in his place was the commander who had ended the Fourth Great War. Shikamaru pointed to the hologram. The weirdness zone, as we're calling it for lack of a better term, is about 200 meters from the impact crater. For now it's stable, but it's not getting smaller. Sensor teams say that there is no natural chakra in the area at all. Instead, they're picking up on an energy signature that doesn't belong to them. It's all over the place and not organized. It doesn't want to be analyzed. We call it Quahog chakra. Sasuke talked with his eyes closed while leaning against the wall. My Rinnegan sees it as a corruption. It doesn't follow the way things are supposed to be. It changes reality based on a whim. The fireball, the flower. It's like a genjutsu that affects the fabric of reality, but the caster doesn't know they're doing it. Sakura added her findings, which were different because of her medical background. I looked at them when they came out. In terms of their bodies, they're completely normal. No chakra networks at all. The adults are not in great health. The man has the liver of a 50-year-old sake brewer and the cholesterol of a cheese fountain. The kids are fine. But, she stopped for a moment. There is a resonance. They're making that chaotic energy passively, like a gland making a hormone. The baby is the strongest source, and the teenage girl is the second strongest. The dog is, strangely philosophical, but not a very good emitter. Naruto said softly. A baby and a girl. Rubbing his chin. Not your typical interdimensional warlords. Shikamaru said. Don't be fooled. The boy Stewie is very smart. He was looking at our buildings and how we lived together within minutes of getting here. And the father, Peter, is a variable of staggering density that can't be predicted. He is either a master of deception or just what he seems to be. In some ways, this is more dangerous. So, what's the plan? Naruto asked, looking at his team. We have 5 refugees from other dimensions who are making a field that changes reality. The other Kage want answers right away. 5 minutes ago, the Mizuki's messenger hawk got here. Shikamaru put his fingers together. We contain, we study, and we neutralize the threat. Step 1, they can't go back to their house. It's the center of the problem and a security nightmare. We put them under house arrest in a safer place, the old Uchiha compound's auxiliary grounds. It has walls, is private, and can be filled with containment seals. Sasuke's eye twitched when he heard the name of his family's compound, but he nodded quickly. It made sense. Step 2. Shikamaru went on. We put together a special team to watch over them, evaluate them, and try to get in touch with them. to learn more about this Quahog chakra and see if they can control it or, even better, stop making it. Team 7, Naruto said right away. He looked at Sasuke, Sakura, and the place where Kakashi usually was. You know each other better than anyone else. You can deal with things that are out of your control, and Kakashi's point of view will be helpful. Sakura nodded. We'll have to treat them like a medical, diplomatic, and security detail all at once. Shikamaru sighed. A drag. But it was the right thing to do. And what about step 3? Naruto pushed. Shikamaru's face got darker. Step 3 is figuring out how to send them back before they cause a permanent rift by being here. Or before that chaotic energy spreads beyond the weirdness zone. If a ninja's life-saving jutsu turns into a bouquet of daisies in the middle of a real fight, people die. The room was very quiet. The stakes were no longer just about people who came to visit. They were about the safety of their world. Naruto said, "Okay," and clapped his hands together. A spark of his old determination came back. Let's go meet the people who live next door. The old Uchiha auxiliary grounds were very different from the lively center of Konoha. It was a walled area with traditional buildings around a peaceful pond full of koi fish and a well-kept rock garden. It had a severe, minimalist beauty that was completely new to the Griffins. Anbu had already put up layered barrier seals all around the outside, and they were humming with a low, blue light. Naruto said in a friendly but firm voice as they stood in the central courtyard. You will stay here. These will be your rooms. We'll get you anything you need, like food and clothes. Peter looked at the koi pond and then at the beautiful, simple wooden buildings. Where's the TV? What about the recliner? And the kitchen with the fridge that always has beer in it, even when you don't remember buying it? Your dietary preferences will be taken into account, Sakura said with a strained smile. But know that you are not prisoners. You are visitors. But you can't leave this compound for everyone's safety. Brian said. So, prisoners. Guests with a very strict curfew, Sasuke said in a low, rumbling voice. Stewie, on the other hand, was using a stick he had found to poke at the glowing barrier seal on the wall. The stick became a rubber worm that was writhing. He yelled and dropped it. Interesting. A non-baryonic energy field that interacts directly with the probabilistic state of matter. It's trying to fix things because I'm here. Lois finally found her voice, the voice of a suburban matriarch who had been pushed to the edge. We really do appreciate your hospitality, she said as she stepped forward with her hands clasped in front of her. But we have a life in Quahog. We have a mortgage on our jobs, our friends, and our lives. We need to go back. There must be something you can do. You are ninjas. You do magic. Sakura said softly. It's not magic, it's chakra manipulation. And we've never seen anything like what brought you here. We're working on it with our best minds. Naruto said. In the meantime, with a smile on his face, we should get to know each other. What do you think about food? I know a great ramen place. I can have it delivered. Peter's eyes lit up. Ramen? You mean the cheap ones in packets? Lois never gives me those. She says they have enough salt to pickle a whale. Naruto laughed and said, I'll take that as a yes. Ichiraku's special is coming up. This was the start of the first real weird cultural exchange. They were sitting on the endowa overlooking the pond an hour later, with steaming bowls of Ichiraku's best pork ramen in front of them. Naruto was slurping his with gusto, while Peter tried to use chopsticks like a walrus doing surgery. So, you're the king of this place? Peter asked with a mouthful of noodles. Hey, Hokage, Naruto said. It means fire shadow. I'm the leader and the protector. He puffed out his chest a little. Cool. I am the head of my house. Lois is the dark figure. Why didn't you take out the trash? He said, elbowing Naruto, who looked confused. Sasuke stood on the other side like a guard, watching. Stewie walked up to him with his now cold bowl of ramen. Stewie started by saying, Your ocular augment. And then he stared at Sasuke's Rinnegan without shame. It sees more than just the normal electromagnetic spectrum, right? You were looking at the Quahog chakra field. Sasuke looked down at the little kid. It sees the flow of all things. Your energy is like a tumor on that flow. Charming, Stewie said with a sniff. From my point of view, your chakra is just a way to change bioenergy. Not very pretty, but it works. My device was tapping into the quantum strings that control these kinds of energies. My father's intervention just filled in the gaps between the layers of theory. You did this. Stewie corrected. He did this, pointing his thumb at Peter, who was now trying to drink his ramen broth straight from the bowl. I was trying to explore in a controlled way. We got terrible tourism. At the same time, Sakura was talking to Lois and Meg. Her calm demeanor made them feel a little better. Chris had found the koi pond and was making funny faces at the fish. Sakura said, "Your kids are one of a kind." Lois sighed. "You have no idea." And a wave of tiredness hit her. "One's a genius, one's Chris, and Meg is going through a phase." She looked at Sakura for the first time and saw the strength in her frame, the kindness in her eyes, and the small scar on her forehead. "Are you a doctor?" "Yes, a medic neen." "And a fighter?" Sakura nodded. "Often, the two are the same in this world." Lois saw Naruto and Peter start a lively talk about being a dad. Peter was telling a long, complicated story about how he and Chris built a birdhouse that attracted every woodpecker in Rhode Island right away. Lois said softly, "He's a good man, your husband," surprising herself. Sakura smiled. "Yes, he is. He's an idiot sometimes, but his heart, it's the heart of this village." She stopped. "Your husband, he also seems to have a strong heart. In his own way." Lois laughed for a short time, which was unexpected. "Oh, Peter's heart is in the right place. His brain is just usually on vacation in Boca Raton." Shikamaru arrived as the sun was setting, casting orange and purple shadows on the compound. His face was serious. He took Naruto and Sasuke to the side. He said in a low voice, but not low enough, "The first sensor report from the weirdness zone is in." Everyone on Team 7 and the Griffins could hear. "The Quahog chakra isn't still. It's spreading. It's spreading along natural chakra ley lines, but slowly. It uses the energy of our world as a carrier wave." Naruto's face fell. "How far?" "Not too far yet. But it's making strange things happen. The bark on a tree close to the area now feels like velvet. The flavor of orange soda is very strong in a puddle of water." Shikamaru took a breath and said, "And a training post in Ground 3 suddenly grew a pair of arms and tried to hug a passing genin before turning into sawdust." Sasuke looked at the Griffin family, who were now listening and had pale faces in the fading light. Peter was no longer laughing. Stewie's scientific interest turned into growing fear. Lois held Meg's hand tightly. Brian bowed his head. Stewie whispered, "It's not just that we're here." And the truth hit him hard. "It's because we don't belong here. Our presence is like a cognitive virus. Our stupidity, our subconscious, our quahogness, is getting into the source code of your reality." Naruto looked from the scared family to his worried advisors, and then he looked out past the barrier seals to his village. The lights of Konoha's peaceful evening were starting to twinkle as the sun went down. The warm feeling of sharing ramen was gone, and in its place was a cold, hard understanding. This wasn't just a diplomatic problem. It was a matter of life and death. The Griffins weren't just people who lived there or stayed there. They were a disease that spread quickly. And Patient Zero was using a chopstick to pick his teeth and wondering if there was dessert. The light outside the Hokage Tower's secure council chamber felt cold and clinical, even though the dawn over Konoha was painted in rose and gold. The Griffin family sat on one side of a long, dark wood table that had been polished. They looked very out of place. They had been given clean, simple yukata to wear, but Peter had already spilled miso soup on his, and Stewie's yukata was dragging on the floor like a funeral shroud. The full power of Konoha's strategic leadership was facing them. Uzumaki Naruto sat in front, his Hokage robe draped over his shoulders. He was no longer the easygoing, warm person he usually was. Instead, he was serious and focused. Naruto Shikamaru was to his right, looking more tired than usual, with scrolls and sensor reports spread out in front of him. Uchiha Sasuke, a quiet, brooding pillar of observation, was to his left. Sakura Haruno stood next to them, ready with her medicine pouch, and Hatake Kakashi finally got there. He was leaning against the wall with his nose in a small orange book called Make-Out Tactics. But his one eye that could be seen wasn't on the pages. There were also people from Konoha's main clans and departments there. The head of the intelligence division was a stern-faced Hyuga, the head of the barrier team was a Yamanaka woman with sharp eyes, and an older man with complex red hair and glasses was a senior Fuinjutsu master from the Uzumaki archives. There was a low-level chakra scan going on all the time in the air. Brian could feel it like a constant static charge in his fur. He cleared his throat, and the sound was loud in the quiet. "Okay," Brian said, trying to sound diplomatic and reasonable. He made his collar straight. "Let's begin with the facts. There has been an accident, which is clearly sad. My family and I are victims of circumstance. We are not a threat. We are simple, peaceful people from a world of logic, law, and public TV. The right thing to do is to help us get back to our dimension as soon as possible. We can sign anything you need, like waivers or non-disclosure agreements. I promise you that litigation is not an option." He ended with a small, pleased nod. The council and Konoha looked at him. Shikamaru spoke up, his voice dry. The dog that talks doesn't want to go to court. Noted. He tapped a scroll on the sensor. Fact 1. Your presence creates a strange energy field that we are calling Quahog Chakra. Fact 2. This field is actively changing our reality in a small area that is getting bigger. Fact 3. We don't know how you got here or how to get back. You aren't just guests. You are a danger to the environment. Peter leaned over. Hey, I took a shower this morning. Well, yesterday. The point is that we aren't dangerous. We pay taxes. Lois does the taxes, though. I'm more of an idea guy. Your ideas tore a hole between worlds, Mr. Griffin. The head of Hyuga Intelligence said, his Byakugan veins pulsing for a moment as he looked at Peter. I don't see any bad chakra intent in you, which is maybe more troubling. Your mere existence is causing the damage. Lois found her voice, the one she used when budgets were being cut at PTA meetings. We know this is a terrible situation. And we are so sorry for the damage and the trouble. She looked at Peter and Stewie with a look that said she was angry. But we are a family. We want to go home because we're scared and confused. We will fully cooperate with any research or effort to send us back. But we need your help. Please. Her sincerity broke through some of the formal tension. Naruto's face relaxed a little. Sakura nodded at Lois in a small, understanding way. Stewie spoke up at that point. He had been unusually quiet, playing with the broken parts of his universal remote, which the Umbu had taken away and then given back after realizing it was completely useless. Stewie said, the intelligence officer is right, but not very clear. His voice as a toddler had a disturbing weight to it. It's not our biological existence. It's our mental resonance. Imagine your reality as a steady, well-tuned frequency. My gadget worked like an amplifier. My father's unique biochemical interference. He glared at Peter. Made a feedback loop that mixed the frequencies of our worlds. We are now sending out a signal, which is really just noise, that your local physics is having trouble understanding. There is a mistake in the translation that makes it look like corruption. Your chakra is like a broken translator for your universe, which is trying to make sense of the mess in our minds. The Fuinjutsu master fixed his glasses, even though he was interested. A resonance theory. You talk about frequencies and signals. Is it possible to mute this broadcast? Stewie said. In theory. But that would mean either shutting down the source, which is morally wrong, or building a dimensional phase shifter to change our resonance to match yours, or the other way around. The first one needs technology that is hundreds of years ahead of what I see here. The latter. He turned to Sasuke. Your eye power. It can see layers in 3 dimensions. Could it be used to find the exact frequency difference? Everyone looked at Sasuke. He didn't move, but the color of his Rinnegan seemed to get darker. Maybe, he said, which was the first thing he said at the meeting. But mapping doesn't fix things. At the breach, the energy is mixing together. There are not 2 different paints, it's a mixed color. It may be impossible to separate them. There was a heavy silence. Lois's eyes lost the hope that had been there. Then we're stuck here? Meg whispered, her voice shaking. Forever? Not always, Shikamaru said, leaning forward. The first thing we need to do is contain and study it. We need to know how this Quahog chakra works and what makes it happen. Is it connected to feelings? What do you think? The big one's dumb luck? He pointed at Peter. At last, Kakashi put down his book. What we need, he said, his voice a slow drawl that made people pay attention, is a joint mission. You are in charge of Team 7. But this is more than just babysitting. We need to go to the source, which is the center of the breach in the 3rd training ground. We need sensor data and to see the heart of the anomaly with our own eyes. We also need to see how the Griffins deal with it directly. Being there might make something useful happen. Or terrible. We will learn either way. A trip to the field, Peter yelled, then backed away when Lois glared at him. Shikamaru said. It is the next logical step. Team 7 and the 5 Griffins. Umbu guards all around the area. We go in, grab what we need, and leave. Minimal exposure. Naruto stood up, having made his choice. Okay. We do it. You are with Sasuke, Sakura, and Kakashi-sensei. Get ready for the unexpected. Shikamaru, make sure the perimeter and sensors are locked down. We're leaving at 1,400 hours. He looked at the Griffins. You will do exactly what Team 7 tells you to do. It depends on your lives and the stability of our world. As the council started to break up, the older Hyuga walked over to Naruto and Shikamaru and spoke in a voice that the Griffins couldn't hear. But Brian's ears moved. He heard bits and pieces. The girl, passive emission spiked during emotional distress last night, not hostile, but profound, recommend separate classification. Brian's eyes moved to Meg, who was looking down at her hands in her lap. What did you do? He thought. The Forest of Death, also known as Training Ground 44, lived up to its name. The sun was blocked out by tall, old trees, making it always seem like dusk. The air smelled like wet earth, rotting leaves, and danger that was always there. There were no normal sounds of birds and bugs. Instead, there was an eerie silence. The team worked together to get through the thick underbrush. Kakashi was in front, and he casually looked for traps, both natural and ones that had been left behind from past tests. Sasuke walked behind everyone else, his senses on high alert. Sakura stayed in the middle, close to the griffins. Her protective chakra made them feel warm. The griffins were a sad sight to see. Lois held on tightly to a borrowed cloak. Chris kept falling over roots. Brian's paws hurt. Peter was unhappy. This is the worst hike ever. There isn't a shop for gifts. Nobody is selling those painted seashells. Where's the candy? Be quiet, Peter, Lois said in a low voice. These people are trying to focus. Stewie was sitting on Sakura's back in a makeshift carrier, which he hated, and using a pair of jury-rigged goggles he had made from broken parts of his remote and some wire. They had a faint glow. Interesting. The concentration of the Quahog chakra is rising very quickly as we get closer to the last known coordinates. It's not a field, it's a gradient. It's like we're walking into thicker water. They got to the crater's edge. The view was stunning. The Griffin house was gone. It had been moved to a safe storage space for study. But the crater stayed there, a wound in the ground. But in the middle, there was no burnt ground or trash. It was a garden of things that couldn't happen. The grass was a bright, cartoonish green and felt like a mattress when you walked on it. The petals of the flowers ticked and whirred like clockwork. A small stream of what looked like liquid, sparkling jello flowed through the middle. The air smelled like ozone and cotton candy. And in the middle, the seed was pulsating with a soft, internal light. It was a crystal structure that was about the size of a football and floated a foot above the ground. There was no one color, but it seemed to hold and reflect all the wrong colors they had seen during the breach. It was lovely and very scary at the same time. From its base, thin, root-like tendrils of shimmering energy dug into the ground of Konoha. That's it, Stewie said. The main point. The physical form of the dimensional interface. Don't touch anything, Kakashi said, his book gone and his body tense. Sasuke? The Rinnegan on Sasuke's head spun. He saw the chakra flows being pulled in from the nearby forest, twisted by the seed, and then thrown back up as the chaotic Quahog energy. It's getting bigger. Using the land's natural energy to stay alive. It's grafting. Is it possible to destroy it? Sakura asked, her fists tight. Sasuke said, I don't know. An attack could cause a huge release of energy. Or it might not do anything. Peter had walked over to the jello stream because he was tired of talking about science. Wow. Looks good. He leaned down and poked it with a finger. The jello shook in a way that made you want to eat it. Don't do it, Peter! Lois and Sakura both cried at the same time. It was too late. When Peter's finger touched it, the whole garden shook. The clockwork flowers closed up. The stream of jelly-like substance hardened. The seed pulsed once hard. There was a deep, resonant ribbit coming from the forest around them. But it was wrong. It was too loud and too deep, and it ended with a small, questioning rise like, ribbit? The ground shook. As something huge pushed its way through, trees at the edge of the clearing broke and fell. Gamabunta, the great toad sage of Mount Myaboku, was the lord of the toads. Or a terrible parody of him, to be more precise. His size was the same, and his hide, which was covered in scars and warts, was familiar. But his eyes were big, round, white and blue circles like in cartoons. There was a tiny, neat blue hat on his head that looked impossible. And when he spoke, his voice was slow, soft, and clear. The giant toad said in Cleveland Brown's voice, well, that's not something you see every day. A small thing that glows. And some people. How are you? The Konoha shinobi were shocked and couldn't move. Gamabunta was a famous person who helped the village. This was a desecration. Gamabunta, who spoke in Cleveland, blinked his big eyes and looked at the seed. Huh. That doesn't look good. You should probably sit on it. That usually fixes things at home. He started to turn his huge body around, pointing his back end at the pulsating crystal. No! Naruto's voice yelled from the edge, but he was too far away. Sasuke was the first to respond. Susanoo, he yelled. Around the group, purple, skeletal ribs burst out, protecting them just as the giant toad was about to fall. Peter Griffin, on the other hand, thought differently when he saw a giant talking toad about to crush the strange rock. That frog needs a good peck. His mind was a mix of cartoon logic and deep misunderstanding, and it focused on the strongest symbol of conflict he knew from his own life. He wanted something to take the big dumb frog's mind off of things more than anything else. The Quahog chakra, which is very sensitive to the griffin family's subconscious and gets stronger when they are close to the seed, reacted. The air next to Gamabunta shimmered and tore, but not like the first breach, which was silent. Instead, it sounded like tires screeching and angry clucking. A second huge figure came out of the rift. It had feathers, 2 legs, beady, angry eyes, and huge, scaly feet. The giant chicken came from Peter's many, pointless grudge matches that always ended in destruction. The chicken squawked, a sound of pure, unadulterated rage, and then it kicked Gamabunta in the side with a spin. "Roar!" Gamabunta Cleveland yelled in shock, stumbling to the side, stopping his fall onto the seed. In the middle of the change clearing, the 2 kaiju-sized beings, one a corrupted summon from a sacred realm and the other a petty, persistent act of revenge from suburban Rhode Island, stared each other down. Peter smiled and pointed. "Look! I helped. I called the chicken. He is my enemy. We have a thing together." Sasuke's Susanoo stopped for a second as he looked at the new person, completely confused. Kakashi's eyes got bigger. Sakura's medical brain short-circuited while trying to figure out how birds work. Naruto and the Umbu Breach team came from the edge of the forest and slid to a stop. Naruto looked around at the seed, the evil Gamabunta, the giant chicken, and his family and friends who were stuck in the middle. "Report!" he yelled at Kakashi. Kakashi slowly closed his mouth. "The griffin male, he seems to have an enemy. And it can grow." The giant chicken lunged at Gamabunta, its claws aimed at his eyes. Gamabunta Cleveland drew his giant Tonto blade, his gentle confusion turning into anger. "That ain't polite," he said in a deep voice. As the first battle of the Titans began, Stewie looked from the seed to his father to the monsters fighting. The data flashed on his goggles. "Interesting," he whispered, his fear now mixed with the awe of a scientist. "The Quahog chakra, it's locked in a story. It shows conflict based on archetypes that are hidden in the mind. Dad didn't just call for a big chicken. He called up the idea of his fight." Sasuke's Rinnegan spun around, seeing the same thing. The seed wasn't just making things go wrong. It was turning the Griffin family's thoughts, memories, relationships, and sitcom dynamics into physical events that changed the world. Peter Griffin's mind was a huge, wild, and very stupid place. Naruto knew that things had gotten out of hand when the forest shook with the fight between the corrupted sage and the avatar of petty rivalry. This was no longer a study mission. Peter Griffin's ID was the weapon in the first battle of a war for reality itself. The world had turned into a loud mess of destruction and nonsense. Every time the corrupted Gamabunta hit the giant chicken, it shook the ground and knocked down trees that were older than Konoha itself. Gamabunta's lightning blasts, which sometimes crackled with energy and other times fizzled into harmless, twinkling lights, filled the air with the smell of ozone. There was also the strong smell of giant, angry birds. Naruto's voice cut through the noise, commanding and sharp. "ANBU, keep the perimeter safe. Stay in the crater to fight. Team 7, get the griffins out right now." Kakashi was already on the move. "Sasuke, protect. Sakura, get the people." A huge chicken feather, sharp as a javelin, hit the ground where Lois had been standing just a second before Sasuke's perfect Susanoo, a majestic, purple, armored warrior, came to life around them. The Susanoo's bony hand swept down, picked up the confused griffin family, and held them in its palm as it rose into the air, above the fighting. "Whoa!" Peter shouted, looking over the ghostly fingers. "We're inside a big purple robot. This is better than the fair in the county." "It's not a robot, you idiot. It's a chakra construct with a lot of spiritual power," Stu yelled, but he was also pressed against the clear chakra, and his goggles were looking at the Susanoo's energy matrix. From the air, they could see the whole area of the quagmire. The corruption wasn't limited to the crater. It spread out like a sickly flower. To the west, a patch of forest had become a grove of giant, living asparagus stalks that waved and sighed sadly. There was a bubbling, brown liquid in a stream to the east that smelled like root beer. The light in the area was off, like the sepia tone of a bad sitcom flashback. Naruto landed on the shoulder of Sasuke's Susanoo with 2 Umbu squads on either side of him. His face was serious. "We need to go back. This is a full-blown singularity. This isn't something we can handle." The fight below took a strange turn. Gamabunta Cleveland, blocking a Talon strike, said, "You know, this is just a big mistake. We could talk about this. Perhaps have a drink. There's a nice pond over there, OW." The giant chicken had pecked him hard on the nose. "We can't just leave that thing," Sakura said, pointing at the seed. It was pulsing faster now, as if it was feeding off the battle's chaotic energy. Its iridescent root tendrils were getting deeper and brighter. "The seed is the source," Stewie said, his voice surprisingly steady. "But it's also the thing that keeps things stable. If you destroy it now, the two realities could snap back together violently, like a rubber band. The recoil could tear both dimensions apart at the point where they touch. So we have to deal with it. Brian groaned. And what about the big chicken? Stewie said. We need data. To figure out the narrative rules. As I thought. You need to know the plot to fix a story. When the giant chicken did something that looked a lot like a professional wrestler's elbow drop onto Gamabunta's back, a huge shockwave spread out. The tremor that followed knocked a few ANBU off their perches. The Susanoo wobbled but stayed strong. We're sitting ducks up here, Kakashi said. Sasuke, can you take us to the North Ridge? It looks less bubbly. A new problem came up as the Susanoo started to move away from the center. The quagmire had an effect on people. One of Naruto's shadow clones, which he made to help with the evacuation, suddenly stopped moving in Susanoo's palm. It turned to the original Naruto with a confused look on its face. Hey, said clone Naruto. Who among us is the real one? The first Naruto blinked. I am. Of course. Are you sure? The clone crossed its arms and asked. I feel pretty real. I remember everything. The need for ramen. The strange pain in my left knee when it rains. Another clone joined in. He's right. What are the objective criteria here? Advantage of being the first? That's a mistake in philosophy. Guys, not now. Naruto snapped, but more clones were starting to talk to each other, and existential doubt was rising. If a tree falls in the woods and no one hears it, but a clone appears in a puff of smoke, did it ever really exist? Thought a clone with a headband that was especially showy. Peter was fascinated by this. Whoa. It's like that movie where the guy is also the other guy. But with a lot more orange. Stewie's goggles made a whirring noise. The quagmire is making subjective perception stronger. Father, the clones are in your mind. In a place where thoughts can change reality, their shared doubt is turning into a feedback loop. The clones were now in a full-blown argument circle. We're all Naruto. But only one of us is the persistent Naruto. What is persistence but a series of short-lived experiences? Sasuke growled in frustration as he tried to keep the Susanoo going. Naruto, get them under control. They are making the local situation even less stable. But Naruto looked like he couldn't do anything. How do you fight with yourself about being alive? Peter was the one who broke the loop. He leaned over the edge of Susanoo's palm and yelled down at the clones who were fighting. Hey! Idiots! The clones looked up in surprise. Peter pointed a dull finger at the real Naruto, who was rubbing his temples. Look at that guy! The one with the face that all of you have? He has the nice coat. Have you ever seen a clone in a nice coat? No, because they don't give the coat to the copy. The copy does the bad jobs and gets hit with jutsu. The receipt is the coat. He's the first one. Now be quiet and do whatever glowing thing you were going to do. The clones looked. The reasoning was perfect in its simple, stupid, materialistic way. The cloak of the Hokage. The sign of the office. The bill. The first philosophical clone said, Oh. Yes. The coat. Yes. Another person said. That makes sense. The clones disappeared in a series of poofs, their existential crisis solved by the deep wisdom of Peter Griffin's worldview. Naruto looked at Peter with a complicated mix of thankfulness and deep, soul-level confusion on his face. Thank you? Not a problem, Mr. Mayor, Peter said, giving a thumbs up. As they made their way back to the North Ridge, the landscape became stranger and stranger. They walked by a clearing where a family of squirrels was having a tense, quiet therapy session. One squirrel was waving an acorn around a lot. There were rocks that had moved around to spell out, bored, in big letters. The Susanoo dropped them off on a rocky outcrop that, thankfully, didn't seem to be hurt. Kakashi looked around the ruined forest and said, We need a new plan. Direct attack is out. To get around here, we need to know the rules. A small communication seal made Shikamaru's voice sound like it was breaking up. Hokage-sama, sensor teams say that the quagmire is growing at a rate of 5 meters per hour. The fight between the two big groups is causing reality to surge in strange, unexpected ways. We also can't get in touch with the team on the western edge. The last message said something about persuasive mushrooms. Naruto tightened his jaw. Got it. Stay in full quarantine. Nobody goes in. He looked at the group. Stewie is right. We need information. To get it, though, we have to get to the seed. But the forest itself is now unfriendly. Our usual strategies won't work. Sasuke said. The forest responds to thought. And his Rinnegan watched the warping flows of energy. To expectation. It is a real minefield. Sakura said slowly. So we need someone whose thoughts are unpredictable. Someone whose hopes are so crazy that the forest can't see them coming and stop them. Everyone, even though they didn't want to, looked at Peter Griffin. Peter stood up straight. Are you looking at the Quagmire Master? The guy who just fixed Clone Gate. I'm really good at this kind of thing. It's all just stuff. Lois put her hands on her head. We're going to die. It's our best shot, Kakashi said with a sigh that said a lot. Peter, you go first. Think about how to get to the glowing rock. But don't think about it like you normally would. Peter's face scrunched up as he thought. Don't think like everyone else. Got it. He started to march down the hill, away from the ridge, and straight toward a thicket of thorns that were softly giggling. Wrong way, Naruto called. Psychology in reverse, Peter said. I'm going to do it. And then he turned around and marched confidently off the edge of the ridge. Sasuke's Susanoo hand shot out and caught him before he fell. They started their journey after a short break, with Peter in the lead and Kakashi giving him quiet directions. Right away, the forest put them to the test. The path in front of them sparkled and turned into a long hallway with bright floral wallpaper and a linoleum floor. A hallway, Sakura said under her breath. Why a hallway? There were framed portraits on the walls. They were pictures of the Griffin family, but they were sickly sweet and perfect. One showed Peter winning a Nobel Prize for advanced sitting, and the other showed Meg as the homecoming queen. Meg looked at her picture, which made her chest hurt in a strange way. Peter said, Ugh, barf. Looks like Lois's mom's house. The key is to ignore the passive aggression. He walked right up to a picture of a smiling Chris holding a perfect apple pie and punched it right in the face. The picture broke apart like glass, and the hallway illusion turned back into a forest path. Look! You have to face the weirdness head on. It doesn't like that. They kept going. Next, they came across a wide chasm that was in their way. There was a river of what looked like melted cartoon lava at the bottom, and it made little fiery bloop sounds. There was only one old, rickety rope bridge across it. Sasuke said, A dangerous obstacle. Made to see how brave or smart you are. Peter looked over the edge. Not really. That's just like the game on the Krusty the Clown show. He scratched his chin and said, The one where the guy has to guess the right door to win a car, but all the doors have goats. The bridge is a trap. The real way to get across is during the commercial break. He turned and walked not onto the bridge, but straight toward a big rock with moss on it at the edge of the chasm. During the ad, they would get ready for the next part. The crew needs to be able to get here, so the path has to be here. He pushed on the rock. It slid to the side with a sound like a gasp from a studio audience, showing a solid, rainbow-colored path that shone across the chasm. Team 7 was shocked. It didn't make sense. It went against all the rules of tactics, terrain, and physics. But in the Quagmire, it was logic that couldn't be argued with. His mind, Kakashi said softly, with a hint of respect in his voice. It's a tactical nightmare. That makes it the best weapon for this situation. Brian, who was walking along the rainbow path, said, I've been trying to develop an air of existential sophistication for years. And here I am, saved by the story logic of kids' TV. They finally made it to the crater's inner ring. The battle between the titans was still going on in the distance, but here, near the seed, it was more focused and intense. There was a lot of potential in the air. The seed itself pulsed like a heart that was sick. But there was one last guardian between them and it. The ground shook, and a person rose up. It looked like a person, wearing ragged black robes and having long, wild hair and a dark aura. His face was pale, and his eyes were a chaotic mix of Sharingan patterns and laugh tracks. An illusion? Naruto got ready for a Rasengan. No, Sasuke said, his voice tight. It's a structure. He could see clearly that it was a mix of historical data from our world and their media. The figure was made up of pieces of Pain, Madara, and other bad guys, but it was seen through the lens of Saturday morning cartoons. It was like a final boss. In the Quagmire. The figure spoke, and its voice was a mix of serious doom and a fake studio audience. Ooh. Fools! You dare to get close to the heart of the mashup? This is the end of your journey. Because I am the amalgamated arch-nemesis. Get ready for a fight of huge proportions. It took a dramatic pose. A single, bright spotlight came out of nowhere and lit it up. Peter looked. He saw the dramatic pose, the spotlight, and the long-winded statement. He slowly smiled. He stepped forward and waved his hand in a way that said, No. Yeah, big speech. Yada yada, heart of darkness, blah blah. Do you know who talks like that? Guys who are about to lose. He turned to the group and spoke in a stage whisper that the arch-nemesis could hear. He's compensating. It probably has a small, chakra pool. The arch-nemesis's dramatic aura flickered. What? My chakra pool is big and. See? Peter said it loudly. Defensive. Total tell. He walked right up to the bewildered construct, poking it in the chest. You're not a real bad guy. You're a parody. A spoof. You're what my friend Cleveland would call a whole lot of nothing. With each word, the arch-nemesis seemed to shrink, its robes becoming less imposing, its spotlight dimming. The Quagmire was translating Peter's perception into reality. He didn't see a world-ending threat, he saw a cheesy, overacted villain from a bad TV show. And in the grammar of the Quagmire, that's what it became. I am not nothing, the construct stammered, its voice now sounding unsure, almost whiny. You're a clip show, Peter declared with finality. A rerun. The amalgamated arch-nemesis let out a final, pathetic no, and dissolved into a puff of silver glitter and the sound of a needle scratching off a record. The path to the seed was clear. The team stood in silence, the only sounds the distant thuds of the kaiju battle and the low hum of the seed. Peter dusted his hands off, looking immensely pleased with himself. Naruto looked from the pile of glitter to Peter, then to the pulsating seed. The journey here had been a demonstration of something terrifying and powerful. In a realm where thought shaped reality, the unassailable, bulldozing stupidity of Peter Griffin was the ultimate force. It wasn't intelligence. It wasn't strength. It was the sheer, unstoppable weight of a mind that refused to adhere to any logic, even the warped logic of this place. All right, Naruto said, his voice quiet with newfound resolve and a tinge of fear. Let's see what this thing really is. They approached the seed, its light casting their faces in shifting, unreal colors. The real work was about to begin. But as they drew near, Stewie's goggles flashed a frantic, red warning. His small face went pale. The energy readings, they're spiking. It's not just reacting to us anymore. He looked up, his eyes wide behind the lenses. It's reacting to her. He was pointing at Meg, who had hung back, looking at the seed with an expression of profound sadness and recognition. The seed pulsed, and a wave of pure, undiluted emotion, loneliness, rejection, the desperate desire to be seen, washed over them all. The wave of emotion that crashed over them was not an attack. It was an exposure. It was the raw, unfiltered emotional landscape of Meg Griffin made manifest, amplified 1,000-fold by the seed's reality-warping power. For a single, breathtaking second, everyone felt it. Naruto felt the hollow ache of his childhood, the desperate longing for acknowledgement that had once driven him, but it was reflected through a funhouse mirror of teenage insecurity. Sasuke experienced a suffocating isolation, but it wasn't the chosen solitude of the Avenger. It was the crushing, undeserved loneliness of being the designated target. Sakura felt the sharp sting of inadequacy, not as a Kunoichi striving to keep up with geniuses, but as a girl deemed plain and forgettable in her own home. Kakashi, behind his mask, felt the old, familiar grief for his lost comrades, but tinged with a new, peculiar shame of being perpetually overlooked in life's grand narrative. Even Peter felt a pang, a confused, fleeting sense that something was deeply wrong, a feeling he usually drowned out with beer and distraction. The wave passed as quickly as it came, leaving them gasping, eyes wide with shared, involuntary empathy. They all looked at Meg, who was staring at the seed, tears silently tracing clean paths through the dust on her cheeks. She wasn't doing it on purpose. It was a leak. Meg, Lois whispered, her own heart breaking anew as she felt, truly felt, the emotional reality her daughter lived every day. The seed pulsed in time with Meg's quiet sobs. Its light softened, becoming less chaotic, more melancholy, a deep, bruised purple. The iridescent roots seemed to reach toward her slightly. Her emotional state is a direct modulator for the Quagmire's output, Stewie breathed, his scientific detachment warring with a flicker of something like concern. She's not generating the chaos. She's tuning it. Before they could process this, the ground shook with a new, more purposeful violence. The distant battle had changed. The giant chicken, perhaps sensing a shift in the energy, delivered a final, spectacular flying kick that sent Gamabunta Cleveland stumbling backwards with a pained, "Oh my goodness!" The corrupted toad vanished in a puff of sickly sweet pink smoke, leaving only his tiny blue hat fluttering to the ground. The giant chicken stood victorious. It threw back its head and let out a triumphant, ear-splitting "SKRAAWWWK!" that echoed through the distorted forest. Then it turned. Its beady eyes, filled with a mindless, narrative-driven rage, locked not on Peter, but on the source of the new, resonant energy, the seed. And standing before it, the girl who had just pacified the zone with her sadness. It began to stomp towards them, each step cratering the earth. Its intent was clear: destroy the glowy thing, and probably everything near it. "Incoming!" Naruto yelled, falling into a defensive stance. Sasuke, full barrier! We have to protect the seed and Meg. Sasuke's Susanoo flared up again, creating a huge, armored wall between the kaiju and their group. The first peck from the chicken hit the chakra armor like a church bell, making cracks spread out across its surface. Sasuke grunted and pushed hard. We can't fight that thing here! Sakura yelled as she got her chakra-powered fist ready. The seed could suffer terrible collateral damage. We need to take its mind off of it. Take it away. Kakashi's hands moved quickly through the seals. Water style, water dragon jutsu. A lot of water came together and hit the chicken's chest. It squawked in anger, shook off the water, which had turned into a shower of lukewarm gravy, and kept coming. Peter was furious that his enemy was ignoring him. Hey! Feather Duster! This way! Do you remember me? The guy who started that fight with you at the mini-mart that one time? And what about that other time at the dry cleaner? And then there was the time at the... The chicken didn't pay attention to him because it was so focused on the seed's pulsing, emotional light. It was as if Meg's amplified sadness had drawn its primal, destructive attention. Meg saw the huge beast coming, the cracks in the Susanoo, and the scared faces of the ninjas trying to save her. She felt a familiar, cold fear in her stomach, the fear of being the cause of another problem, of getting bad attention, of being a burden. The seed pulsed in a deeper purple color. And then Meg changed in some way. This wasn't Quahog. These ninjas weren't her family. They hadn't made fun of her yet. Sakura had been nice. Hinata had smiled at her in a shy way. They were trying to help her. This time, the bad attention didn't come with teasing, it came with protection. And that made her feel something new and strange, a flash of defensive anger. Not for her, but for them. Stop it, she said, but her voice was lost in the noise. The chicken pulled back to peck again. Leave them alone! Meg screamed. The scream wasn't very loud. But it was a direct link to her emotional surge, which was a mix of fear, gratitude, and a strong, protective urge she had never felt before. The quagmire answered right away. The giant chicken stopped pecking. Its eyes looked glassy. It slowly stood up straight. It looked at its own huge claws and then at the scared people behind the purple wall. A deep, human-like sadness spread across its bird-like face. It made a soft, confused bloop sound. It had one huge, clear tear in its eye that rolled down its feathery cheek and hit the ground like a small pond. It had just been hit with the full, understanding force of Meg Griffin's whole life. It felt very, very, and completely uncool now. The urge to fight went away, and all that was left was a strong desire to go home and think about its life choices. The giant chicken turned and walked away with a last sad look. Its wings drooped as it walked into the distorted forest, where it probably went to find a quiet place to think. There was no sound at all after it left. Team 7 and the griffins stared, mouths agape, at the figure that was moving away, then at Meg. She was shaking and hugging herself, and she looked just as surprised as everyone else. Chris summed up the situation with his usual clear style. She made it feel bad for itself. Stewie fixed his goggles as the readings went crazy. Interesting and scary. When she focuses on her empathic output, it doesn't just create feelings, it forces them. An emotional genjutsu that is very powerful and only works in a certain area. She didn't just get rid of the threat, she changed the story that made it happen. Sasuke let his Susanoo go and looked at Meg with a new, sharp look. It wasn't a small thing to have a power that could calm down a kaiju that changed reality with just one emotional broadcast. It was a weapon with a lot of power, but it was also very subtle. Naruto walked over to Meg, kneeling down to her level. His face was calm but serious. Are you okay, Meg? She nodded, but couldn't say anything because her breath was coming in short bursts. What you did was amazing. You saved us, he said, and he meant it. She let out a choked sob, but this time it was mixed with something else, a little bit of warmth. Someone was thanking her. Someone thought she was helpful. Shikamaru's panicked voice coming through the calm seal broke the moment of peace. Naruto! The quagmire's energy surge just set off every sensor in the village. The emotional broadcast hit home. There are a lot of strange things happening inside the village walls. What kind of things happen? Naruto barked. They're the stone faces on the Hokage monument. They are moving. In Konoha, the first panic had turned into a tense, organized evacuation. Calm-faced Chunin led civilians into reinforced shelters. The streets were empty except for Jounin and ANBU patrols. They weren't looking for enemy shinobi, they were looking for off patches of reality. The first sign was a low, grinding noise that came from the mountain where the village was located. It was more felt than heard. People looked up. The four huge, sternly carved faces of the first, second, third, and fourth Hokage blinked on the side of the cliff. Stone eyelids moved over stone eyes and then opened again. Then, with the sound of grinding granite and shearing limestone, the head of the fourth Hokage, Minato Namikaze, tilted his head to the side, as if he were curious. The people in the village below all gasped at once. The faces weren't just moving. They were coming apart. As the huge stone heads pushed themselves forward, they pulled with them rough-hewn, simple stone bodies. This caused huge pieces of the mountainside to crack and fall away. They were 400-foot-tall golems who stepped down from their holy perch with steps that shook the world. Crunch. 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 They landed in a half-circle around the main administrative district, their blank stone eyes watching over the village they were made to protect. But those eyes didn't have any life in them. They didn't have the will of the heroes they stood for. Instead, a faint, sickly purple glow, the color of Meg's empathic surge, emanated from their mouths and eye sockets. They were puppets, moving because of her power and getting twisted up by the quagmire's confusing grammar. The first mouth of stone opened. The voice that came out was a deep, rumbling monotone, but the words were disturbingly dull. I have a headache. The second nodded, which made a gust of wind. My back hurts. Standing for decades is bad for my posture. The third raised a huge stone hand and rubbed his chin. Does anyone remember my favorite tea? The fourth just looked a little embarrassed. Sorry about this. Then, all at once, they started to move. They weren't being mean or destructive. They were just being big and clumsy, like giants who didn't know how strong they were. The first took a step, and his foot crushed a market stall that was now empty. The second reached out to steady himself on the Hokage tower, and his fingers dug deep holes in the strong masonry. They're not attacking, Shikamaru reported from the command center, his brain working feverishly. They're just existing. But their existence is catastrophic. Standard ninjutsu isn't working very well. Fireballs hit their granite skin with no harm. Lightning strikes left black scorch marks but no cracks. The golems hardly noticed and kept talking slowly about their aches and pains and things they had forgotten they liked. Naruto got the report in the quagmire, and his face went pale. The stone images of his ancestors were tearing down his village, which he had spent his whole life protecting. The images were brought to life by a power that came from a sad teenage girl from another world. We need to go back. No, he said, his voice tense. Stewie started with, the seed. Thanks to Meg, it's stable for now, Sasuke said. The threat right now is to Konoha. We can't fight stones that big here. We have to protect our home. Everyone agreed. The siege in the village now took precedence over the mission to learn more about the seed. They started to run away, but Lois grabbed Naruto's arm. This is our fault, she said, her eyes full of fierce, motherly guilt. We're going with you, Sakura said. It's too dangerous. Is it dangerous? Peter laughed and puffed out his chest. Lady, we just made a big chicken cry and talked a rock monster out of being a bad guy. We're the weirdest people around, like the A-Team. Also, it's our stupid glowing rock that makes your statue guys freak out. Maybe we can also talk them down? Naruto looked at Peter, then at Meg, who was looking down at the ground, scared and ashamed. He saw Stewie's smart mind, Brian's cynical awareness, Lois's stubbornness, and Chrisness. They weren't ninjas. But they were at the center of the problem. And in a fight against animated stone powered by distorted emotion, normal shinobi tactics weren't working. Okay, Naruto said, and a plan began to take shape. Come. But you do what we tell you to do. You have to take care of Meg, Sakura. No matter what, keep her safe. Her strength might be the only thing we can use against her. Kakashi-sensei, Sasuke, and I are all on the front line. We need to get their attention and find a weak spot. He looked at Peter with a wild idea in his eyes. Peter, you're with me. Your way of thinking helped us get through the woods. It might be able to get through stone. Peter waved, but his face was serious. You can trust me, Mr. Mayor. I've dealt with a lot of stupid people in my life. The trip back to Konoha was a blur of shunshin and frantic speed. When they got to the outskirts, they saw a scene of strange destruction. The stone Hokage were walking through the central district, and their conversation had turned to memories of the past. Remember how the village used to be just a few houses? The first boomed, accidentally knocking the top 3 floors off of an apartment building. IT was quieter. The second agreed, sitting down on what used to be the intelligence division annex with a ground-shaking thud. Naruto's heart hurt. He saw groups of shinobi trying to trip the golems or lead them away from buildings that were still standing, but they weren't very successful. The golems were too big and heavy. Spread out. Naruto told them to do it. Sasuke attacked the third from the air. Make it blind. Kakashi-sensei, you and the Jounin squads need to keep the fourth busy. I want the first. Peter, come with me. Naruto jumped at the giant stone face of the first Hokage, Hashirama. Peter, who was on the ground, leapt up and up at the giant. Okay, big guy, Peter said. You're a big stone jerk who's ruining the town. Do you know what big stone jerks don't like? Being ignored. He put his hands around his mouth. Hey! Hugging a tree! The head of the stone first slowly turned, and its blank eyes dropped to see the small, loud man on the ground. You dare to talk to the first Hokage? The monotone voice said. Yes, I dare. Do you know why? Because you're a fake. A big lie. The golem stopped. I am the carved likeness of Hashirama Senju. A likeness! Peter shouted, walking up boldly and pointing a finger at him. You aren't the real deal. You're nothing but a statue. A place to visit. The real Hashirama is probably somewhere being cool and wooden, and you're just a rock that people take pictures of. You are a gift. In the emotionally charged room, each word, full of Peter's absolute, dismissive certainty, hit the golem like a physical blow. The weak purple light in its eyes blinked. It stood up straight, its face showing anger. I am not a souvenir. I am a monument to greatness. Peter waved his hand and said, Monument, shmonument. Do you know what happens to monuments? Pigeons poop on them. Kids paint mustaches on them with spray paint. You are not a hero. You're a famous place. And not even a fun one, like a water park. The stone first Hokage looked down at its own huge, granite hands. It let out a low, grinding groan from its chest. It wasn't a threat, it was a sound of deep existential crisis. I am. A public restroom? It whispered, terrified by the thought.